It was early May, and I was standing in the rain by an interstate somewhere in Ohio. Trucks flying by 85 miles an hour rocked the dead minivan by the roadside, and I wondered, am I going to die in Ohio? I resided in Ohio from the age of 7 to 10, but every memory I have there is sad, so I don't know if I can really say I lived in Ohio. I technically survived Ohio. My parents' marriage died in Ohio. I think it ran out of gas, and they rolled it into a ditch, like I'd had to do with the minivan. So I stood there, next to the dead vehicle, like the lifeless shell left behind by some long-gone cicada. I wondered if I'd survive. But I felt pretty relaxed about it, since at least it happened on the way back, not on the way to Ohio. A friend and I were on a spiritual pilgrimage to see the great revival preacher Nick Cave. We'd been washed clean, healed, and forgiven in the muddy waters of Gothic rock and roll. So if we were going to live or die, at least we hadn't missed that concert. If we'd run out of gas on the way there, the car breakdown would have been the least of our problems. There'd have been a pair of nervous breakdowns topped with emotional meltdowns. Or as Nick Cave would put it, a 10-ton catastrophe on a 60-pound chain. It was drizzling by the roadside. It had started the night before, just as we neared Columbus. The 5-hour drive from Buffalo to Columbus had been mostly mild, but as the city came in sight, the skies had very suddenly darkened. Look yonder, Matt pointed as a big black cloud drifted over Ohio, turning sunny 7 p.m. into midnight. A strand of white lightning ripped the dark sky in half. That's him, Matt laughed. Nick Cave has arrived. And then for a few minutes, all hell broke loose. We drove into a howling, roaring thunderstorm. But just as we pulled into a parking spot, it subsided into the light drizzle that would be with us for the rest of the trip. We entered this grand Ohio opera house and climbed a palatial staircase with banisters like the open arms of a giant marble goddess. We had arrived. Then we took a closer look at our tickets, and we climbed a much longer, winding back stairwell to the balcony, and when the friendly usher led us to our seats, we were in the very last row with our backs against the wall. This was my doing. I'm not a gambler, and I never gave us better than 50-50 odds of actually making it there, so I had bought the cheapest tickets I could find. Still, it was a little disappointing to have come so far and still be so far away. But I was happy just to be there. So we sat down, and with 2,700 other sinners, we waited for Nick Cave. I'd been waiting a long time, more than half my life, and yet the minutes seemed so slow. I started listening to Nick Cave a quarter century ago. I was mesmerized by this goth gospel sound headed by a singer-songwriter who combined elements of Jim Morrison and Leonard Cohen, Joy Division and Johnny Cash, plus something entirely unique. He sings from the heart and mind, but also from the dark nether regions and a rumbling gut. Some of his songs just sound like acid reflux, like if you hear this and think, oh, I'm going to check this out, be warned. A lot of his lyrics plumb the depths of horror and death, and horror is worse than death, ghastly things that make it scary to talk about him in public. Like someone could walk up right now and say, are you endorsing Nick Cave, the guy who gleefully sang such and such evil thing? Well, I can't apologize for him, but he's also got these moments where, like a soul simmering in purgatory, or like a killer having his head shaved for the electric chair, he howls for redemption and mercy. And when he writes a love song, it's not an ode to some ethereal fantasy angel, those songs that no human on earth could actually measure up to. His muse is a dark mistress, and his ballads have a pungent, pulse-pounding animal urgency. Tragedy struck in 2015 when one of Cave's teenage sons fell off a cliff to his death. And then in 2022, one of his older sons died. In this last decade, Cave's musical output has been like a long funeral dirge. His recordings drifted out of melody into spoken word pieces over ambient washes of sound, and I often wondered if his hope and vigor could ever return. But the legend lived on that if you put this guy in front of a couple thousand people, he would explode with cathartic energy. Elizabeth and I had tickets to see him in Toronto 7 years ago. I was so excited, but then just as we were putting our shoes on to go out the door, one of our kids threw up, and she said, "We can't be in another country if so-and-so is sick." And I thought, they're kids, they throw up all the time. Nick Cave is only coming tonight. Note that I don't name the kid, and I actually don't remember which one. I've erased it from my memory, because if anything had happened to Nick Cave and he didn't make it back, I wouldn't want to be telling my grandchildren. And that's how your parent hurled on my only chance to see Nick Cave. Well, there are so few second chances in life, but this was one of them. I bought these tickets and then nervously listened to his newest album, The Wild God, while folding laundry. It was not the dreary dirge I'd come to expect, but a triumphant march with muscular rhythms and a gospel choir. And when he sang about regaining the ability to see beauty, like being touched by a flame, I just broke down and cried right there at the laundry table. From that table to the concert venue was 300 miles, and I sat there after waiting all that time. When Nick Cave walked out onto the stage in a black suit and tie, he looked out at the crowd in this opera house and smirked. "Well, this is awkward. All these chairs here. You don't know whether to stand or sit." Then he grinned and said, "Kneel." And people fell to their knees. Not a note of music had yet been played, but already this was a whole new rock and roll experience, like I'd never seen or imagined. Then the songs started. The band rumbled and roared. Gospel singers in white robes rocked back and forth, and this 67-year-old singer howled and snarled and sang. He would dance like Elvis, then throw his microphone down and slam on a grand piano, then leap up again. A couple of times he descended into the crowd, stood on seats, lost souls surging around him, and he would touch their foreheads. This guy who'd experienced the lowest depths of human sorrow and loss had arisen with this power to heal. I was kind of glad to be all the way in the back, invisible with no one behind me, because it was such an emotional experience. About halfway through the show, I realized that my friend had disappeared. He'd gone to the bathroom, but then it had been 3 or 4 songs and he hadn't returned. Then this stranger walked up to me in the dark. I couldn't really see him because my eyes were full of tears. And he said, "You're looking for your friend. He is not here." It was like the angel standing by an empty tomb. The guy pointed at the stage. "He's gone down there. He wants you to join him." I wondered a moment, does that mean he's dead? Or is someone trying to get me out of the way so they can smuggle him unconscious out of the building? But I decided these were concerns for after the concert. So I went down the stairs and followed the sound. Nobody stopped me to ask if I belonged, so I just kept descending until I was 20 feet from the stage. It was one thing to look down from the balcony, sort of like watching him perform for other people, but a whole different experience to be looking up at him, amazed, like a disciple in a Renaissance painting. He was even more incredible up close, leading sing-alongs, handing the microphone to people in front so he could lead dances and hand-clapping. Before the encore, he left the stage for a couple minutes. I looked around. I still couldn't find my friend. So I ventured deeper into the thick of the crowd. Cave came out and performed 4 more songs, and again I wondered, am I dead? I'd certainly descended from the sky balcony to the underworld. It festered and roared and rocked. Then the band left the stage. He sat down at the grand piano and led one more sing-along, like a lullaby, into my arms, and he said goodnight. Well, it turned out Matt was fine. The mysterious stranger had pointed me to the wrong side of the stage, but we met up again in the lobby. "Did you make it?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm still alive." He said, "Sorry to abandon you, but on my way back from the bathroom I thought, I can't go back up there. I don't belong way up there. I belong down in the pit." He was right, in the sense that having journeyed the farthest to get there, well, an orchestral conductor once gave me the best performance advice I've ever received. Remember 3 people in the audience before taking the stage. The one for whom this is the first time, the one for whom this is the last time, and the one who had a really long and crummy journey to get there. Well, our journey hadn't been that harrowing yet, but we'd certainly ventured farther than anyone else, except arguably Nick Cave himself, who comes from the land down under, that old purgatory called Australia. And that experience, really the 2 experiences of seeing him from above and then from below, I knew that anyone in that room, whether it was their first rock concert or their last, or if they traveled 300 miles with another 300 to go, they would know that they'd been rocked. It was on the drive back, listening to Cave recordings, glowing like new baptized babes, that we ran out of gas on the road. But the minivan that was dead rose again. Some kindly state troopers drove me to the gas station. The gallon I bought did not produce any miracle, but then a nice guy from AAA showed up and poured us a couple of gallons. He didn't even charge us, since he said he didn't feel like filling out paperwork in the rain. But Matt and I both knew the truth, the real reason there'd be no documentation. A highway ghost, or some angel of mercy, had come to get us back on our way. In this life, we face tragedy and loss and despair. Nick Cave lost 2 sons, and the thought of it is worse than any fear of death. And for 10 years after that, I wondered, could he ever rise from this sorrow? I know he still carries that pain inside. I saw it. But having faced it, stared into that black abyss of human helplessness and hopelessness, he returned, haunted, but also illuminated with a healing power. He was glowing, transforming, vibrating, calling all the cosmos, man and beast, the living and the dead, to look at this creature of darkness, clawing for the light. And the experience we had, being in the presence of this faith healer, we felt so alive. So now, after all these years, I guess I can finally say that for 2 unforgettable hours, I really lived in Ohio.